Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm here with Lars Kure Juul. I practiced that so many times before we came on. Kure Juul. He is the author of this short but fantastic book, Organizational Happiness, which is an international bestseller. He's also a trusted advisor, a consultant, sometimes an interim executive here from Copenhagen. Lars, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to having one of those conversations with you. I enjoy the conversations you have with people. So
good.
So let's make it an as we talked about, an important conversation, right?
Yeah, an important conversation. Yes, let's do our best to make it important.
Yeah.
So something I was just thought I'd tap into before we started the show was just to look at the latest Gallup stats around employee engagement. And it has gone up a little bit, maybe helped to some extent by a lot of people working from home, but we're now at 40% engaged, of people engaged, but still 47% of people not engaged, 13% of people actively disengaged. So most people in the workplace are, if we use this as a proxy for happy, are not happy in the workplace. So this topic is as important as ever, organizational happiness. Just give us a little bit of the backstory as to how you came to write this book.
Oh yeah. It's always been something that is very passionate about. It's been close to my heart, but also I've been around for many years in different roles, leadership roles, executive roles, consultant roles, trusted advisor, but it's always been for me to kind of focus on how do we get what we talk about into real life? How do we get from strategy to action? And for me, it's always been important, the well-being, the employee engagement. Now we call it organizational happiness. Some professors call it flourishing.
Sorry, call it what?
Flourishing.
Oh, flourishing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and whatever we call it, I think it's within the same ball game. It's for me. My starting point is looking at the organization, helping leaders and organizations. So for me, either I've been a leader or I've been advising leaders, and it seems to me that 3 years ago or something like that, when I started, I think I had this book in me for 5 years or something, and I've been writing a lot, and at some point it was like 500 pages, and with a lot of cases, academics and things like that. But actually, I think so. The academic in me wanted to make this book 500 pages, Lars on the front page, telling how smart and academic I was or I am. But I think actually what we need as leaders in organization is more like a how-to. It's more, I think we have academics enough. I think we have cases enough on, like you say, you reference to Gallup on employee engagement or organization happiness. We are in a place now where we want to know, how do we do? And I don't think many have that recipe or are trying to offer that recipe or trying to offer that guidance. So I've been working with this for many years because and from different angles, I think. One is the very obvious one that, organization happiness, well-being, employee engagement, it's just a very good business case, right?
Yeah, that's where so it's not just how do you do it, it's how do you sell it, right? I think isn't it the first chapter of your book is, right, how do you build the business case?
Yeah, and I think that's an important. I mean, for us HR professionals, and I'm one of them. I mean, we need to build that business case, and I think I'm offering a framework for doing that. But I think the book. So back to a question is since I think that there was a Harvard Business Review cover issue in 2012 talking about the happiness dividend. And I think from there on, it's kind of got a little bit mainstream, especially in the US, talking about organizational happiness in some ways or forms, but not very much on the how-to. What do you actually do? Because the science of happiness is a very complex thing. So how do you actually bring it into your leadership and to your organization? So that's what I've been trying to do. And then, as I said, it came from 500 pages to, like you said, a short version is like almost 200 pages. So it's supposed to be an easy read, inspiration. How do I do? What can I do here? It's not a one size fits all, but it's a how-to book from strategy to action, I call it. And I think, I think we talked about this initially when we spoke last week on the phone. For me, it was a book I had in me, so at some point I had to get it out, and I also promised the publisher and some partners to do it, and suddenly I had to do it. There's too many promises there, and but also how it was received. Actually, maybe you know this. It's a vulnerable thing to put your heart out there on the market, and put your heart into a book and then publish it, and say how will it be received. Like I said, the academic in me, or maybe the ego in me, wanted to be more academic, but that I don't think that's what leaders and organization needs. So we put it out there, and early last year, and very fast, within a week, it became a #1 bestseller in Japan, which was a big surprise for me. Of course, it was a nice feeling, but it was I think I don't know. Still don't know why that happened in Japan. Maybe someone's.
Well, isn't there that famous that they have a word for people who die on the job there? I mean, they
Probably,
right? Yeah, I think they have one of the highest. Isn't it the highest instances in the world of people like just dying from overwork, and so I guess they're probably as desperate as any nation on earth for organization.
Yeah, and I think, but now I know it. But then a few weeks after, it became #1 in the US and in Canada, and Australia, and most of the European countries. So, and now of course we know why, because there was a message in there. There was a simple framework on how to, and I think that's what we need in this in this area. And I think that so it was, of course, a very vulnerable thing to put it out there, and it was good, and I'm very happy it was well received. So a lot of the things I've been doing the past year has been talking about this, but also consulting for different firms on how to implement this.
Right. And so you said it's been with you for 5 years. I mean, it's an enormous, obviously, effort to create a book. Why do you care? Why do you care so much about happiness?
Yeah, very good question. I think, I think it's deep in me and in most people. I think, and the pursuit of happiness, right? We are all in the pursuit of happiness in some way. From we wake up in the morning, and I wanted to introduce that in an organization context, because I think we as leaders and organizations have a responsibility also. I think there was a recent study say we spend 90,000 hours at work in a lifetime, right? It's like a third of our life. And we also have a responsibility and obligation to serve in that way, to create a space in the workplace for happiness. for various reasons. It could be for the well-being of the employees or for the individual. It could be in an organization context, but there's also, I think, a broader responsibility, which is as a nation or as a leader of a society, you're looking for happier, healthier employees, right? For various reasons. I think there is a little bit of a mega trend here that many nations are looking, how can we create happier, healthier societies? I know they even have in Dubai, they have the happiness minister right now, which is a woman. Yeah. I know in India, they have a board that is close to the prime minister that is advising him on happiness in society. And I know many governments are moving into that, say, how can we look at the individual, because that makes sense, obviously, but also from a society business case, you could say it's a very good business case to have happier, healthier employees, right?
Right. Yes. No. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. And okay, so you wanted to. That makes sense. You wanted to bring this to the workplace, but is it that you've always been pretty happy and you'd want others to be happy, or is this more from a place of you've had unhappy experiences and that's driven you to make somehow the world a happier place?
Yeah, both. I mean, in my age, I have had a lot of experiences in the workplace, both as a leader and also as a consultant. So I've seen a lot. But I think I think it's more so it makes sense for me, and I'm passionate about it, and I'm very fortunate to be working with this because it also makes me happy, right? So I make a contribution. I feel it's a big purpose for me. But also I think, and that's the role I take sometimes. It's like we have sometimes the happiness, being happy in the workplace. It comes from I would call it a hippie happy place, right? It's like, and fair enough, and it's I like that too, but it doesn't work in a boardroom. We need to move that agenda into the top management, the executive level, into the boardroom. We need to talk about why this makes sense. Maybe from a social responsibility kind of angle, or maybe from a business case angle, because we think we can make a better business. Because in some, and that's what drives me actually. It's like, I think this is a no-brainer. So that's where I come from. I mean, it makes sense in so many different ways, and I think I'll be able to convince anybody that this is either a good business case, it makes sense, whatever. And I think many organizations or leaders should understand that, and I'm very happy to help in that sense. So yeah, that's what's driving me, making a difference or having an effect, actually.
Right, I can see that. And there probably aren't too many professors out there really thinking about how they might sell happiness to a CFO, right? That's what you really brought it down to. That individual in the office with the CFO. How am I going to sell this hippie shit, right?
Yeah, it's a good point, because we and I think you're also coming from that role or that angle. Exactly. It's we as HR professionals. We have that. Still, we have that image of being the touchy-feely. I think we should do, and I feel the organization is, and sometimes, and very often we are right if we are good HR professionals, but sometimes we don't have the effects that we could, because we're not making the business case, we're not doing the effort, or we are not, or we're not able to build the business case. So this is the book is on one hand is offering this to help you build the business case, and on the other hand, getting to know or understand the science of happiness connected with real employee engagement.
Right. So let's take the first of those without giving too much away from the book itself. But what are the sort of the top, I don't know, 3 factors that you're going to put in front of your CFO when you're selling happiness?
Yeah, it's like when we're building the business case, I think you have to make the effort, but it's not a very difficult one. I think there's a lot of things that goes up. Let's start with, so you're working with organizational happiness, real employee engagement. You can call it many things, but we call it organizational happiness. I think the performance goes up, the customer satisfaction goes up, employee retention, innovation, employee engagement. And even you can measure, we have cases on this, profits goes up, sales goes up, quality, and of course, customer loyalty. I mean, and we have some figures on this also. I mean, it's not just something that we are saying, and I think Gallup is one of the major players in offering us data on this. There are other very good institutes, Harvard and Stanford, and they also building the cases. So all that is going up, and just putting figures on that, and we know the figures depending on your industry and how you organize and things like that, your business environment, and we have figures on how much is the retention, or how much is the productivity going up. So we have that figure is between 7 to 31 or something like that. And just that figure, if you put that into to a business case, I mean, the CFO would understand it. And I think he would be very happy if you meet that, if the CHRO meeting the CFO with that agenda. And of course, there's a lot of things going down, and also in that business case. And this is, then we're talking about stress, for instance, burnout, sick leave, things like that, which is normally in organizations also a huge item on your balance sheet, if you put it that way, right? So I think building that business case and maybe just be very conservative about it, you would have a business case that you at a later stage could follow up on, and so that is that's one angle on the book, which I think is important, that's the how-to, right?
Right. Yeah, very important, I think. And the first, and actually the first book I've read in this sphere, which puts that right at the front, and it makes complete sense. So
which is interesting, and I thank you for mentioning that, because I very often fall into that role, or being giving that role, or take that role of being the business, the organizational happiness business case guy, or productivity guy. And sometimes I meet other experts in well-being. You have one in England, Nick Marks, is an excellent, I think, expert in that area. But sometimes we don't want to talk about productivity and happiness in the same sentence, because we think it's too blunt, or it's too direct, or it's too, and I don't get it. I think because that's what it is. It's that's what it is. I mean, of course, there are other advantages to my health or to the society and things like that. But one of them, to make this happen, is definitely putting a business case on it, and putting the equation between employee engagement and productivity.
Yeah, let's not get too noble about it, right? We could define it. Yeah. I can sometimes, I suppose, I can sense a little bit of myself in that sometimes with some of these themes. I can fall into, no, but we should be doing this for its own sake, because we're good humanitarians, right? why should we need to sully this conversation with commercial considerations, right? Yeah, I could definitely fall into
No,
that.
but I get that, and I'm coming from that place also. But I think I think the if we are too afraid of telling what it is. I mean, this is just one thing in the organizational happiness agenda, but let's talk about it. Like, and then some organization, like you said, it's like, but maybe we should talk about well-being for the employee. But still, that conversation at some point ends in, why are we doing this? And some organization can say, because we have a higher purpose, we want to contribute to society and we want to make everybody happy. But very few are in a position to do only that. There's something very often behind on a business model or a business case, I think.
Yeah. And so,
and I wanted to say, I'm afraid of being too business case oriented on this, but I think it's important. But it is a win-win-win situation, right? Wherever you start the win, it's a win for the individual, it's a win for the organization, and it's a win for the society also, or the nation, or whatever, however, wherever you want to go on that level.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And as I've reflected in other podcasts, I think a lot of the malaise we currently see within organizations, this split between management and staff and employees, and the lack of engagement does spill out into society, I think, in terms of political tensions and potential, people being more attracted towards more extremist political positions. I think there's a link here, right? It's not like just what happens in the company stays in the company.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I mean, and that takes me all the way back to, I don't know if you've read the book Maverick by Ricardo Semler, who introduced very sort of progressive employee empowerment type practices to his organization, and saw a massive reduction in domestic violence as a result of changes in the workplace. That's what he was getting reported from the spouses of a lot of the, at the time, male workers was, So it's all connected.
Yeah, and I wanted to, if I may, it's like when you refer to the numbers from Gallup, I think they're very interesting, very well done. I think I'm a huge fan of Gallup. But it points to something that I'm working with at the moment. Also, it's the satisfaction or the engagement, the highly engaged, or the just happy, or I'm just happy to be here, or I'm just a little bit engaged, or whatever. And you're pointing to those numbers of, like, was it 40?
Yeah,
was engaged,
that's the latest,
right?
Yeah, latest engaged.
Yeah. And whatever that number is, and it comes out, I think, every year or twice a year. But whatever that number is, it points to potential. It points to, if I'm a leader, if I'm serving an organization as a leader, it points to there is a huge potential in there. How can I release that potential? And I think sometimes we, as consultants or HR professionals or trusted advisor, we have many names. Sometimes we are pushing an agenda that is, we can call it burning platforms, disruption, reinventing, pushing a big change, something
transformation.
Like that. Transformation is a good one. Yeah, that's right. And I've been a part of so many projects with those kind of words around it. And my experience is, and from many of these, is that what we are doing to an organization, and now I'm talking as a consultant or trusted advisor, but also as a leader, what we're doing is we're pushing the organization, which means that the organization gets a little tense, which means that performance actually goes down, because there is a little bit of anxiety, a little bit afraid, what's happening to my job, all these kind of things, because we're pushing a change agenda. this number from Gallup, I think you could look at it in a different way and say, how do we release the potential that is already there? Because look at these numbers. If we could get these from 40 to 50, that is a nice business case for a starter. But that is not about a burning platform, or like you said, transformation or reinventing. This is about how do we release the potential that is already there, that it's already within me, but I'm not giving it, or I'm not there at my job. And I think this is about organizational happiness. How do you, to take one of the areas, how do you use your superpowers for the mission of your organization, right? If you're able to do that, you're releasing a lot of potential. You're highly engaged.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the quotes I made a note of here before for this conversation. You write, great leadership is about releasing and unlocking potential, not about transformation. And that, I think that's a very powerful message here. Because, and I reflect myself as often I will talk the language of transformation, but this gave me pause for thought. And no, there's another way to look at this. And if we can just sort of take the lid off what is constraining these people becoming happier, flourishing, being more engaged, just find those places to make those adjustments, that may be a better paradigm to approach things from. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Thank you. I like that. I like that approach. And sometimes I use the metaphor of, having a corn, a maize, and you heat it. And this is what we do as leaders, right? We heat, we communicate, we lead, we do a lot of things. But this is what makes it pop, right? It's the potential that is already in there, and we need to be able to pop our organization. So we have the popcorns. If that is a good message.
Sounds more fun as well, doesn't it? Who wants to be part of a pop project or a transformation project, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So we started to you mentioned, one of the areas, you've got these three lenses, right, or three sort of focuses. There's purpose, strengths, and compassion. And I think you started to talk about strengths there, or superpower. Should we start with the strengths piece, and then perhaps
let's do that. I think so. In all of these three areas, we've been trying to go into depth. What can you do? I wanted to say it's so to understand the model. So there is a purpose on the top, and then there is a strength and a compassion side, or culture, leadership. This last thing. And I think for me, it's about fine-tuning or finding the happiness sweet spot, or finding the sweet spot between all these three things. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's more like a framework you can work with as an organization. You say, maybe I'm doing pretty good on purpose, so maybe I need to focus more on strength, or superpowers, as I sometimes use it. So let's talk about superpowers. It's for me, it's really about, as HR professionals, we call it, sometimes we call it strengths-based leadership. And this, it's easy to say, but I think there is a winning strategy in there. I've seen it work for many organizations now. It's about what kind of conversations do you have when you have your annual appraisal, or whatever you call it, review. What is the conversation you're having? You're having probably like I'm brought up in the corporate world also. It's like you probably have a conversation about how is it going, a few projects, and then, along the way, and then we put the last half hour aside to say, what is it that you're not so good at that you need to be better at? Which is really a losing strategy, because it's like taking, what is it that I'm not good at, that I need to focus my attention on. I think the conversations we need to have is about what's your superpower, what's your strength, and how can I, as a leader, help you put that into play for our organization. It's a very different conversation, and it sounds so easy and obvious, but we are all brought up with the room for improvement or thought, and so the conversation or the structures we need to have in place or the processes for HR is very different. What are the conversations you need to have? How do you know your own superpowers? And how do you know the superpowers of the team that you're part of, so you're able to set the right team? This is, I think, in short, strengths-based leadership. Maybe it goes a lot deeper, and there's a lot of experts on this, and I've also put a few things in there in my book. But
yeah, and it really does cut against the grain, doesn't it, of how we're brought up in schools. You'll go through all of your subjects, and you've done well here, Richard, but what's going on here? Let's see if we can improve your geography, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's right.
And I saw some other interesting research that was which was looking at entrepreneurs, and they found that often entrepreneurs they're not grade A students, right? They don't tend to be what's that term in the American school, valedictorian, or the person who's done really well across all the board.
Yeah.
They tend to be the people who have built a singular strength in one area, and become obsessed about that thing, right? And then that ultimately manifests as some kind of business,
Yeah.
So it does chime with that research, and then you say something. Well, I think you quote. Is it Drucker? The task of leadership is to create alignment of strengths that make weaknesses irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's now been for some years, maybe 10 years, working with strengths-based leadership, and in some way or some form or another, it's very easy to tell the quick story. Okay, I get it. That's a winning strategy, of course. If we all focus on our superpowers and we use it and we bring it into play. But it turns out it's actually a difficult change to make for leaders, because the conversations you need to have is very, very different. It's conversations about, when was the last time you felt really energized? Who were you with? What were you doing? What does that tell you about your abilities and it's not a conversation we're used to having. So there's a little bit of education, and for HR professionals, we need to put different processes and structures in place to facilitate our leaders to have these conversations. So I see that we have done it with an organization of almost 5,000 employees, and in a different geography than Europe. But it's like, okay, we train 130 leaders, they all energized, and then it's like a, I don't know what you call this, but it's like you're slipping into the good old mode, or you're getting a little bit stressed, and then you're starting to have the old conversations and things like that. So, but I think the notion of this thinking of that we all have a superpower. It's like, when I take off my shirt, what's my superpower? And you need to know that superpower. And you need to know, because you need to tell about it. And you need to know the superpower of your team, so you are able to work with them.
Yeah, and in the book, you've got a few exercises at the end of the chapter, and I actually did them myself. I was going through, and I was like,
really?
I'm surprised by some of the, because one of the ones was, when were you most energized? And it was actually when I was entertaining someone as part of facilitating the workshop, and I found the guy on the other side was like laughing, and I was like, yeah, that was when I felt last time I felt really energized, and it's sort of surprising. And then I'm like, okay, so am I supposed to be an entertainer now? I guess it started an inquiry for me, which I'm not familiar with. It was so I can see why this is not something immediately going to find easy.
Yeah, very good point, and I think so. Thank you for sharing that. Also, it's like, and I don't want to be too technical about it, but there are ways of course, we have all these assessments. Gallup is doing an assessment actually. StrengthsFinder is one that you can do. The VIA StrengthsFinder is also a strengths assessment. Is also something the tools you can use, and we. I was just running a course in March, just before everything closed down, but in Costa Rica, and at the UP's, the university there, and we have a leadership program called Positive Leadership there for 4 days, and there we're also training this. What's your superpower? And if you don't know, you need to find out. That's first. But maybe and if or maybe you get input from your peers and like a 360 or something, but you need to know your superpower or your superpowers. And you also need to have a story that you tell. Because it's not always about, if I was the manager, it's not for me to find out, you need to tell me. Also, you have a responsibility, I think. So that little, sometimes we call it an elevator pitch. You need to have that elevator pitch with your superpower in it, right? I think we all need to have this in our back pocket. It serves us well in an organization, if we change jobs, if we want to go on interesting projects and things like that.
Yeah. Which again, I can imagine is like, well, even as you say that, I can feel a little friction in myself. I'm like, oh, all right. Yeah, it's not something we're used to doing, right? We're not taught at school to share our superpower with the rest of the class, how we say.
No, that's I think it's a very good point, and I think it also, I can relate to that. You coming from the British system, probably, I would guess.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it's the same in the Nordic region, but other geographies have. In the course that I mentioned, we try to get people standing on a chair, right, telling your superpower, just to push a little bit on telling the story. And for some people, also personality-wise and things, it's easier to do this. And for some, it's a very alien concept to brag about your own superpowers. But if you don't, I think you would be I would say the other way. If you do it, it's easier for you to be in a happy place in your work environment.
Yeah, that makes sense, because people are they're going to clock that. They're going to start to think, okay, where are the opportunities in my realm that I could push you into, or give you a job in, right, or a role in. Yeah, I can completely see that. You want to be able to sort of advertise to the network this power, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. No, I can see that.
So did you put a word on your superpower, Richard?
Well, I'd have to go back through them, but I certainly no, I don't think I got as far as naming it and describing it in that way. But it was, but I guess it did give me with it. So I took it, I take it on, and I can see the value of it. But it did leave me with this question, which was, okay, but if I've got these behaviors that are my superpowers and I can see the value they add, what about the areas in my life where if I ignore these weaknesses or these other areas, I'm leaving a trail in my my wake, like of destruction in my wake, like don't hire arseholes. You might have these brilliant superpowered individuals who are fantastic, but if they're never working on their weaknesses, what does that mean for the system around them?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and I think that's also where you have to be careful of taking this too far, because if you have a fatal flaw, or if there's a hole in the boat, you need to fix it, right? And sometimes you need to address these things, and in some organizations there are some things you simply need to be just half good at. And you need to address that, of course. But I would say very often you are surprised of I'm sometimes surprised of the things that leaves me with no energy. Someone else will pick that up and say, "This is just what I do. I love it."
Yeah.
And it even makes that she is or he is even better and faster than me in doing these things, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes when you maybe just a little bit, I mean, if you don't know your superpower, sometimes a trigger is sometimes, you delegate something to other people or you ask them to do something, and then you have this little animal on your shoulder maybe saying, what the hell, what, I could have done this in 2 hours and now it's taking 3 days. Maybe that's a pointer that this might be your superpower, or this might be one of your superpowers, right? This might be something that you're really good at.
Yeah, I really like that as a guide actually in the book. Yeah, I remember that now. If this is something that you find really easy and other people are like, well, how did you pull that off so easily? Or why are you not nervous about this thing you're about to do? Or why doesn't that strike you as being difficult? That's probably a good sign that it's your superpower. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. But then you also say, okay, so I get like if there's a hole in the boat or there's fatal flaws, you can't ignore those. But you also ask the question like, what are the areas in which you need to develop? So explain that, what does development mean when we're talking about working to our strength?
Yeah, I think it's about, so taking a little bit too extreme, I think it's about honing your, excel in what you're good at. And I think sometimes you don't even know your superpower. Sometimes you need someone to prompt you, right? Sometimes you need something or someone to, and I think sometimes we look at these, what is it called? America Got Talent, or I don't know what you call it in England. It's
Britain's
probably
Got Talent.
Yeah, that's right, of course. And you have this guy, this opera guy. I don't know what his name was 6 years ago or something like that. Paul Potts or something.
Oh
like
yes,
that.
Paul Potts. Yes.
Yeah. And I look at him, and I thought this was a older guy, I would say. It's coming from a call center, I believe it was, or something like he was selling something, advising something, and he never really explored his talent. And suddenly he was on that stage. Someone put him on that stage. I don't know the whole story, but suddenly now he's in the super league of opera singers, right? But he didn't know that. So something prompted him. Someone helped him, something facilitated something. And I think as leaders, we have that role. We need to take that role to explore your superpower, because it's not like sometimes we have these high potential programs and organizations. And maybe you need to have them, but I think it's much more important that we have programs where we say everybody has a talent, everybody has a strength. We just need to find out what it is and how you use it in your organization.
Yeah, and that makes enormous amount of sense to me. Because if you could spread the scope of where you might be able to improve leadership, happiness, engagement, and you can find a few tweaks to the system that allows to bring everybody up even a little bit, that's presumably going to have a much more impact than just selecting a smaller cohort and focusing on improving that group, right?
I think you have if you're sticking to the consultants words, I think right there you have your competitive advantage. I think in there, if you're able to do this in a structured way, so it becomes a language and it's something that you talk about, could be your competitive advantage together with your purpose.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about those other two areas then, purpose and compassion. Let's touch on those.
I think on let's take purpose first. I think it's so important that as an organization, you need to have a strong purpose. We all know that. I don't need to explain a lot around that. It's a big thing. Everybody's talking about it. But for various reasons, you need to have it. You need to have it because it's, from an organization point of view, it's attracting top talent. It's retaining the top talent that we have in our organization. And it's also an employer brand, right? And I think for those reasons, I think we are moving into, that's what I'm seeing right now. We're moving into, the baby boomers are retiring now, right? And I think there will be an even bigger lack of talent that we have seen the last maybe 5-8 years. And I think in there, you need a strong purpose, just for that reason. I think McKinsey 10 years ago called it war for talent or something. I don't like it. Don't especially like that phrase, but I think we've been moving into a market where we will see that again. I think so for that reason. And when I work with organizations, it's also about building the story, the purpose story that you tell to the market, you tell to also to your future employees, to your current employees, and all other stakeholders that you have, so you're proud of being a part of the organization. And this is where I say it's not a one-size-fits-all, because some organizations already have that purpose. Maybe you just need to build the story. And some organizations really, really have a hard time telling what I would call a heartfelt story that is more than profit.
Yeah.
And you can think about selling alcohol or cigarettes, or even Coca-Cola. We know some of these brands are the best at telling about their purpose because they know they need to do that. And I think a huge part of the marketing budget goes to that storytelling. It's almost like, I think Coca-Cola, I love Coca-Cola, just to put that. I drink a lot of Coca-Cola, but it almost feels like that Coca-Cola has managed to put, to say, when you think of Coca-Cola, you think about happiness, right? You think about Christmas, you think about whatever it is, like, and that's a good example of someone who knows about the importance of a strong purpose. And Coca-Cola is doing a lot of other things also. They're doing a lot of other good things, of course. But it's an interesting case in terms of, and if you're working for the UN, like I'm doing sometimes, it's a totally different exercise because the purpose is already there. Maybe you need to unwrap it or make it simple, but it's already there. So maybe you don't need too much attention on that.
Yeah. And you tell in the book you actually left a firm, right? Because you didn't feel the purpose.
Oh yeah. I mean, so I have the personal story. I mean, it's like, I think I was an executive there for this region, but the product was really not sexy, not at all. The task was very interesting. The leadership.
Can you tell us what the product was?
Yeah, it was cement.
Right, that's the definition of not sexy.
How do you? I know. I mean, now I know that you probably could talk about sustainability, saving the world, building houses that doesn't fall on people's heads and things like that. But we were not in that place at that point. Right? But of course, I was attracted to other things. I was convinced. Could be the people in the company, the task at hand. What's the goal, the task that I should be working with, or the big black company car, whatever that ignites you, right? But along the way, for me, that happened between 2 or 3 years. It's like when you go on your vacation, you have a little bit of time to think about how you spent your life. It just didn't resonate with me. It didn't. I couldn't see myself spending my life earning money to earning more money to another rich family sitting somewhere in Central Europe, right? It was having fun, but I decided to leave and put someone in my position instead, right? It turned out to be a good decision for me, at least.
Right. So very important then to have this purpose and then be able to tell the story of the purpose in a way that resonates with you.
And I wanted, and I have maybe I have a point here that's I've just been discussing with an organization, because we need to have a purpose that resonates with the personal purpose of the employees in the organization. It doesn't have to be completely aligned, but it somehow needs to resonate with as you were kind enough to mention that I left the company there, but it didn't even resonate with my personal values. So every time I had a little bit of time off, there was something in here that kind of, or someone here, or telling me that, what is it that you're doing? And so this thing about having a purpose that resonates with the employees in the organization. And I think sometimes we are almost too competent in talking about purpose. We have small circles and bubbles like you and I talking, and we consultants or professionals, and we're talking about a higher purpose, more than profit and things like that. But I think we have to accept that maybe for 85% of the global workforce, we are working because we need to put food on the table and educate our children, right? That's the real purpose. And I think you have to be aware of that when you're building your story, that you're talking to everyone, including your employees, and not just the high level annual report stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's a very important point. And so often these purpose statements and the narrative gets built by an executive team, right? And their relationship to the organization is going to be very different, potentially, to a lot of the people working in it. Yeah, the general population of that company.
Yeah, I think I think you're absolutely spot on there. It's like, and what we're talking about organization happiness here, this is what comes from in many annual reports. You have our employees are our most valuable resource, right? Organization happiness is the answer to that annual report statement, right?
Yeah. And then the third and final of these lenses, or these, is sort of takes the hippiness up a level. And you talk about that in the book, right? And that's compassion. So? Your compassion, right? What is it? Somebody told it, Lars. You've already come to us with a happiness, and now you want us to think about compassion.
Yeah, very good. I think, and this is what to start another place. I could have called this book another Employee Engagement 2.0, something like that. Will probably not be a bestseller.
Cracking the code of employee.
Yeah, something, or 7 steps to global domination or something. But but I choose to, because it is about happiness, and we need to talk about happiness. And this is about compassion, and we need to talk about compassion and leadership. Because I don't think, and for some cultures, and I have been traveling with this message for some time now, and some cultures, they get it immediately. It's like compassion is a part of almost the religion, the part of everyday life. In our part, I would say, of the world, in Northern Europe, your part of the world also, it's more like compassion. What's that? I mean, you come here, what's the business case for compassion? But I think we need to talk about compassion. And I don't think you can have real leadership without compassion. Compassion in this is defined as a real interest in other people's difficulties, and there the leadership comes, and a burning desire to do something about it. This is compassion, and this is leadership. And I think sometimes we talk about empathy as the number one leadership, something, especially these days, in maybe moving into a more well-being focused work world, you could say. And then we talk about empathy, but I would say, and I think most people, if they look into it, would agree that empathy can be a very passive thing. Empathy is, I feel you. And then what? I think that's not leadership. Empathy, you have to put action behind that. I mean, and that's what I'm talking about, a burning desire to do something about your difficulties. So it's understanding it and having an interest in other people's difficulties and a burning desire to do something about it. I think that's almost the definition of real leadership.
Yeah. No, I can see that, and I can see how that serves this unlocking. This unlocking. So if I'm empathizing with people that difficult, and I've got a burning desire to do something about it, that's going to translate into unlocking people's potential, right?
Yes, and I think in this is that circle that we have in the happiness sweet spot there. This is one of the I would say where you have to be very careful about not being too spiritual or too competent around what to do about it. I think you have to be very simple about it. It's about, you have to cultivate a culture of compassion in your organization, because if you do that, and exactly as you're saying, if you're able to do that, this is a key to unlocking, right? Exactly. And I think that's what sometimes it's when we train this, sometimes we do these trainings of cultivating a culture of compassion. What do you do as a leader? Because it can be mind-blowing if you haven't worked with it before, but it's about asking questions. It's about, normally I say it's about two things, about paying attention and be present. Those two things. If you're able to do that, you can move mountains. And sometimes it's not the compassionate, it's not about, I would say it's about asking questions. It's about asking simple questions like, tell me. That's it. And the next question could be, tell me more. and in that way, you're starting to have a conversation where you are able to be compassionate as a leader, right?
Yeah. And that's about taking me out of it, right? And just creating the space for this person in front of me to share, right? To expand on.
That's right. Without, just being there. And I think there's an interesting topic here just for you to, if you want to explore in another podcast with someone. I think our attention span as leaders has fallen dramatically the last 10 years.
Right.
We have too many devices. We have, everything is, like you said when we started this, do you have something that clings?
Yes.
And of course, my phone has been, there's probably 10 or 20 messages now, right? And on that, and a little bit of my attention went until I turned it so I couldn't see it. But if we have too many things going on for us, so sometimes the empathy or the compassion becomes a functional thing. It becomes something that someone told me to be, but you cannot have. I don't think you could be present unless you feel that I'm present, right?
Right. And I think that this all feeds each other, right? And I'm just so I'm just going to relay an anecdote with another guest who wrote the Happiness Manifesto.
Oh, yeah.
Henry Stewart. I don't know if you're aware of him. But when I went to interview him on the podcast, I was like, Henry, do you want to do the podcast? He's like, yes. When can we do this? And he's like, pick a time, anytime, the next 3 weeks. And, he's the CEO of a reasonably large business. How many CEOs do you know with empty diaries? And that's because he's fulfilled on, I suppose, the vision of your book, and that is to unlock the potential of his staff so that he's not back-to-back meetings, bogged down, carrying this company, right? Making all the decisions himself. And that's why I say this is sort of self-reinforcing, because he's done all of that unlocking. He's now got time and space to be present, to be compassionate, to ask the deeper questions, to listen. So yeah, it becomes these virtuous reinforcing mechanisms that you start to unleash when you take this approach, I think.
Yeah, and we have so many. So I have many leaders going through I'm meeting many leaders in trainings or in one-to-ones, but I think we have to be. I think there might be something here now that our attention span is going down, and we kind of accept it. But I think it's a kind of it's an error. I think it's something we shouldn't accept, because in there, as you were saying, and I'm writing in the book also, there is so much potential. If you're able to be present for one person, just for you, for just maybe 2 minutes, it's not something that many people feel these days, because there's a phone ringing, there's something going on, and it might even be that while you and I are talking, I'll pick up the phone. And these company cultures, right?
I have a particular family member who won't be named comes to mind as you speak.
That's right, and it's almost like, I don't know how you want it on this podcast, but it's almost like if we haven't set the scene and the rules for this, if I was picking up the phone while you were talking to me, it's almost like giving the finger, right? It's almost like, unless we have the conversation about what is that I'm doing. So yeah, there's something there, I think, that we need to address and do more of. I think the paying attention and being present, because there's so much power in that as leader. I think it's very, very effective as leaders to be able to do that.
Yeah, it just reminds me of another a guest whose company, their engagement scores were so high, the surveying company had to create a new category of engagement called super engaged for their employees. And the MD of that company, Nikki Gatsby, then often wrote the book Super Engaged to describe her company's culture. But the CEO, that was the MD who wrote the book, the CEO of that company, it's called Propellernet, lives in the French Alps, and he brings his team out to just spend time walking in the mountains, right? Completely devoid of any potential distractions. And I should also say, a very successful company, right? So
yeah.
Good. Well, it's been a fantastic tour of the book. Here it is once more: Organizational Happiness. The happiness sweet spot, which we talked about, and your motivational landscape, which we didn't get into, but perhaps that could save for another time, or for those who
sure.
read the book. Anything I've missed? Anything you want us to just sort of share before we close out?
No, I think there is one message that maybe it's because it's very top of my mind, because I spent some time this morning with the company, but we talked a little bit about that hippie happy, or that it's almost like when we are too many HR professionals in one room, everybody is very comfortable because we understand each other and we talk the same language, but I think we have to be very aware of what it is we're doing and who we are talking to. So I think I'm a very big fan of making it simple. Both when you communicate to your organization, but also when you communicate to going into the boardroom and going into the speaking with the executive team. We have to be very careful not using language that we have rehearsed almost for 10 years because we're so much into this subject. Because if we're doing that and coming from that academic thing we started off with, if we're doing that, we'll never have an effect. We'll not share the message in a good way. So sometimes we have to cut away the eco or the academic and then talk about what is this really about. So not being too competent and not taking ourselves too seriously. I think it's an important message when you work with these things.
Yeah, I think that's a really very important point. And I think the thing I would add to that as you were speaking is not be too moralizing, not be too moralistic. I think that's definitely a trap I could fall into. Let's just talk about the sort of the facts. Yeah, to some extent.
Yeah, that too, and talking about. I mean, as I said, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, so let's talk about how we do it. How do we do it best? It's not a huge investment. It's maybe allocating other investments. And it's sometimes, and I think we meet this as maybe it's a different subject, but as a consultant or trusted advisor, I sometimes see people that needs an expert, but it's not very often. Very often, the executive team or whoever hires me, they need someone they can trust and someone who can hold their hand.
Yeah.
And that's it. And so they don't need an arrogant expert that tells them. They need someone they can trust and someone to hold their hand and help them.
Right. Okay. Well, so for those out there who are really interested in this, then obviously they can go read the book. Is there anywhere else you would point people who want to start building organizational happiness in their companies? I
think we didn't touch on this, but the website motivationallandscape.com is a good place to start. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect. I'm very as you probably can feel, I like these conversations. I like to exchange ideas and help, also inspire. So LinkedIn is also a good place, I think.
So look you up on LinkedIn, motivationallandscape.com, and the book Organizational Happiness.
Sure.
Unfortunately, spelt with the American Z, but I'll let you off.
Oh, let me say. Let me just say it's here. This is the Spanish version.
This is Spanish.
And we have it, and it's also in Arabic right now. So
I'm just being a British snob. It's fine. The Z's okay. All right. Thank you once again. It's been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you taking your time to share with the audience your message. Thank you, Lars.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was a pleasure.
And a pleasure for me too. Thanks.